Excellencies. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Would you kindly take your seats? Good morning, distinguished delegates. Would you kindly take your seats? We are about to start. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Would you kindly take your seats? We are about to start it. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Please kindly take your seats. We are about to start it. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I declare open the 16th session of the Conference of the States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities, and call to order its first meeting. I invite the conference to consider the agenda, item 2, election of the President and the other officers of the conference. After consultations among all regional groups, the states parties appointed the Bureau elected of the Conference of the States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disability for the 16th and the 17th session. The Bureau elect consists of Tunisia as the President-elect, and Georgia, Greece, Sri Lanka, and Panama as the Vice President-elect. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect Tunisia as the President of the conference by acclamation? I hear no objection. It is so decided. May I also take it that the conference wishes to elect as vice presidents Georgia, Greece, Sri Lanka, and Panama by acclamation? I hear no objection. It is so decided. It is my great honor to invite His Excellency the Ambassador Tarek Ladeb, Ambassador of Tunisia, to the podium, assume the presidency of the conference.
distinguished delegates, representatives from the UN, civil society, national human rights institutions, a very good morning and welcome to all of you present in the 16th session of the Conference of States Parties. It is indeed a great honor for Tunisia to be the president of the Conference of States Parties. And on behalf of my fellow Bureau members, vice presidents from Georgia, Greece, Sri Lanka, and Panama, I wish to express our profound appreciations for your trust and confidence in us to take up these important positions. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to Article 34, Paragraph 5 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Rule 12 of the Rules of Procedures of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the necessary quorum for the meeting is 2/3 of the states parties. As there are 186 states parties to the Convention, the quorum is 124 states parties. I was informed by the Secretariat that the required quorum for the conference is obtained. With this, may I now proceed to item 3 of the provisional agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in document CRPD/CSP/2023/1. I see no objection. It is so decided. We shall now proceed to the organization of work, which is item 4 of our provisional agenda. The first item on my list is about NGO accreditations. Colleagues, a list of non-governmental organizations requesting accreditation was circulated to all states parties on the 28th of April 2023 in accordance to the Rule 25, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of Procedures of the Conference CRPD/CSP/2008/3. The Secretariat has not received any requests or notice against any request of accreditation. Therefore, it is understood that the list of NGO applications for the accreditation is approved, and these NGOs may participate as observers in this and future sessions of the Conference of States Parties. Colleagues, in keeping with past practice, the conference also welcomed participation by national human rights institutions and the Global Alliance for National Human Rights Institutions as observers in this session of the Conference of States Parties. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was adopted in 2006 and came into force in May 2008. We are happy to see the stable trend towards universal ratification of the CRPD. To date, we have already 186 states parties, demonstrating our strong commitment to the rights and advancement of persons with disabilities. Taking this occasion, I would like to extend our warm congratulations and special welcome to Timor-Leste, who recently ratified and joined us in this family as a state party to the Convention after the last session of the conference. Colleagues, the international commitments to equality and empowerment of persons with disabilities has been strengthened in the past decades since the adoption of the CRPD and the 2030 Agenda. Our states parties and the international community have been taking steps to implement the Convention. Progress has been made in many of our countries and by the United Nations. Yet, there exist challenges and gaps, and much still needs to be done and can be done. to make a difference in the lives of over 1 billion persons with disabilities worldwide. There is a need for increased appreciation of accessibility and disability inclusion as an effective way to realize the rights and achieve development for everybody, including persons with disabilities who are left behind. Over the years, our annual Conference of States Parties has been steadily growing and become one of the most important global forums of disabilities. This year, our 16th session of the conference is taking place at a critical juncture as member states, the United Nations, and the whole international community are taking actions to try building back from the COVID-19 pandemic and address a myriad of multifaceted challenges that are affecting our countries and people, especially persons with disabilities, and at the same time striving to put the Sustainable Development Goals back on the track so that no one is left behind. Our conference offers a prime opportunity for states and stakeholders to reflect on experiences and lessons learned over the time, identify gaps to strengthen policies with the aim to improve our practices on the ground. In the coming few days, under the overarching theme, harmonizing national policies and strategies with the CRPD, achievements and challenges, we will be able to focus our deliberations on some pertinent issues, including, first, ensuring equal access to and accessibility of sexual and reproductive health services for persons with disabilities, which is dealt with for the first time in the history of our conference. Second, digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. And third, reaching the underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities. I would like to say a few words in Arabic. Sayyid al-Amin al-Am,
Excellency Secretary-General, Excellencies delegates, Tunisia is proud to act as the president of the 16th sessions of the Conference of Parties of the CRPD, which comes at a very important juncture and is really important this year as it is in tandem with the continuous efforts to overcome the impact of COVID-19 and achieve the socio-economic recovery, as well as to enhance our efforts in order to expedite the progress towards the achievement of the SDGs in light of the 2030 agenda, remove the obstacles, imbalances that would hinder such an activity. In addition to that, we need to come up with the perspectives that would ensure enhancing the resilience and capacity and sustainability of communities for a fairer, more equal, and more developed world where everyone would entertain all of their rights so that we will never leave anyone behind. And we do believe that such aspirations and ambitions cannot materialize without genuine integration of people with disabilities within their own communities and without ensuring that they entertain and exercise all of their rights in equality with the other segments of society and without empowering them to be fully and genuinely engaged in all public life without any discrimination, neglect, or marginalization. And as much as we appreciate the United Nations and national initiatives and the key role by the civil society organization, human rights bodies, in order to further progress the rights of people with disabilities, we at the same time aspire for the fact that this conference of ours would be able to deliver and on the objectives that we all want to achieve jointly, and we hope that it would contribute to the promotion of the convention and to translate its content and provisions into practice on the ground and as part of the overall cultural mindset. I switch back to English now.
So I kindly invite all delegations, civil society, friends to actively participate in and contribute to these discussions. And we also look forward to make full use of this unique opportunity to jointly explore ways for further strengthening international cooperation and multi-stakeholder partnership among states parties, United Nations, international development institutions, and civil society, especially persons with disabilities and their organizations. Together, we can do more and better to advance our shared mission, the full realization of equal rights and inclusive development of all persons with disabilities all over the world. I thank you. Distinguished delegates, it is my great honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, to make a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I am very pleased to join you as we open the 16th session of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We are together today to look back and take stock, and look ahead and take action. The adoption of the Convention 17 years ago marked a landmark moment in our shared journey towards a more just and inclusive future for all. Since then, the Convention has spurred remarkable progress. 186 countries have ratified it. 75% of state parties have passed laws to guarantee the integration of students with disabilities in mainstream schools, and the percentage of countries with school materials inclusive of students with disabilities has tripled. Nearly 80% of states parties now prohibit discrimination in hiring against persons with disabilities. And over 90% have adopted national disability laws. Today, however, the progress we achieved is at risk of reversing. We are confronting a cascade of crises, from the lingering effects of COVID-19 pandemic to the worsening climate emergency, to proliferating conflicts, soaring humanitarian needs, and the global cost of living crisis. There are more than 1 billion persons with disabilities worldwide. 80% are of working age, and 80% live in developing countries. Yet, when crisis grips communities, persons with disabilities are often hit first and worst. In every emergency, from natural disasters to pandemics to armed conflicts, persons with disabilities lose their lives at vastly higher rates. Workers with disabilities who are already experiencing exclusion and marginalization are often the first to lose their jobs and the last to be rehired. Women and girls with disabilities are more likely to suffer violence and abuse, face discrimination, and remain trapped in poverty. We must do much, much better. Everyone, everywhere, has the right to live lives of dignity and opportunity in societies that are peaceful, prosperous, and just. And this is our shared ambition, and it is our collective interest. Because a world in which persons with disabilities can realize their full potential is a world that is more equal, more inclusive, more vibrant, fairer, and better for all. And it begins by ensuring the principles enshrined in the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to make sure that they are made real in people's lives everywhere. Excellencies, this conference highlights 3 areas where we must make progress now. First, we must improve digital accessibility for persons with disabilities. Innovation and technology can be powerful tools for inclusion. They can enhance access to information, education, and lifelong learning, and they can open new avenues for persons with disabilities to fully participate in every aspect of life: social, economic, cultural, and political. But that remains theoretically, unless technology is accessible. which is why we must invest in closing the connectivity and the digital literacy gaps. Leaving no one behind means leaving no one offline. Second, we must ensure equal access to sexual and reproductive health services for persons with disabilities. This issue deserves far greater attention because it has been so deeply neglected. It is not only a matter of justice and rights, including fundamental reproductive rights for women with disabilities. Access to sexual and reproductive health services can be the difference between life and death. Third, we must do more to ensure the full inclusion and active participation of persons with disabilities in all their diversity, including children and older persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples with disabilities, and persons with intellectual and psychological and psychosocial disabilities. And specifically, that means shifting mindsets to ensure persons with disabilities are fully included in decision-making processes on all issues that affect them. It means working together from start to finish, which must closer consultation and participation involving persons with disabilities, particularly from underrepresented groups and their representative organizations. And it means realizing the powerful call of the disability movement, nothing about us without us.
Excellencies, at the United Nations we are committed to take ownership and show leadership. Our United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy is now in its 4th year of implementation. As of today, UN entities and country teams have met 30% of the benchmarks set out in the strategy. Let me be clear, while this is progress, it is neither fast nor broad enough. We must, and we will, pick up the pace. My commitment is ironclad. Guided by persons with disabilities and their representative organisations, we will not stop until disability inclusion and accessibility are fully built into every aspect of our work, across every policy, programme and operation, from headquarters to the field. Excellencies, together, let us keep our promise to leave no one behind. And let us at long last realise a world in which every person can live lives equal in dignity and rich in opportunity. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, for his statement. It's now my great honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Csaba, the President of the General Assembly, to proceed to the rostrum and deliver a statement.
Mr. Secretary-General, Mr. Conference President, Madam Committee Chairperson, Mr. Special Rapporteur, Madam Special Envoy, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to participate in the opening of the 16th session of the Conference of States Parties to the CRPD. Let me thank Mr. Kabbara of Lebanon and Mr. Muftah of Qatar for joining us today. We have much to learn from your perspectives on how to harmonize national policies with this groundbreaking instrument. This convention is indeed a history maker. It marked a paradigm shift in our thinking. It took us away from viewing persons with disabilities as recipients of social protection towards recognizing them as full rights holders and active members of society. 15 years on, it is important to ask, are we removing the physical, technological, and attitudinal barriers for persons with disabilities to participate equally in communal life? We must acknowledge there is still much to do to translate the Convention's landmark provisions into real change on the ground, particularly in terms of access. Access to food, healthcare, housing, and other provisions that are key to well-being. Access to schools, workplaces, courthouses, and other public facilities that are so essential for our daily community life. Access to services and technologies that support independence and personhood. We simply cannot fulfill our 2030 pledge to leave no one behind if we do not step up our action. Our SDG framework offers many ways to make a difference, setting out 7 targets explicitly focused on persons with disabilities. Here, it is especially crucial to have accurate data. By collecting them, policymakers can identify the bottlenecks, and then they can allocate the resources accordingly. These efforts will be particularly important for overcoming the barriers to digital inclusion. Persons with disabilities often have lower incomes than others, making the cost of adapted technology or connectivity services a burden. I'm committed to supporting this mission, to build societies of inclusion and justice. Just yesterday, we had a meeting on the role of easy-to-understand communication, helping people with disabilities to engage fully in your life. It was a privilege to convene the training session on accessibility and disability awareness in April. And on Thursday, I look forward to addressing and chairing the Assembly's high-level meeting on equal access to justice for all. It will feature remarks by a person with disabilities who is helping others like him, to navigate the complexities of legal systems around the world. In these and countless other ways, persons with disabilities are often not waiting for governments to act. They are forging partnerships, and they are advocating for political and public participation. With the pivotal SDG summit around the corner, it is on us, the international community, to pay attention to these matters and to do what we pledged, to tackle the roots of marginalization and to work at every turn to promote the equal enjoyment of human rights by all. By all, including persons with disabilities, no matter the circumstance. Because our sisters and brothers with disabilities are different and not less. And we should know them for their abilities. Let us not forget what a Paralympic fencing champion said. At a certain point of time, all of us will face with challenges of disabilities. Just most of us don't know when this moment comes. But all of us have something to offer to our communities, including becoming the best in the world on something special, something valuable. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Csaba, President of the General Assembly, for addressing to our conference, and we feel grateful for his long-term leadership and his support to the conference. Distinguished delegates, I now kindly invite Ms. Gertrude Oforiwa, Fefoame, Chairperson of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to make a statement.
On your left, Gertrude. Sorry. The water is here. Thank you. Excellency, Secretary-General, President, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I wish to express my thanks to the Bureau of the Conference of State Parties for the invitation to speak. It is my pleasure to address you as the chair of the CRPD committee and take this opportunity to pay tribute to all previous chairs, and with this sorrow, announce the sudden demise of one of the previous chairs of the committee, Mr. Dalami Bashiru. He served from 2019 to 2020 as a chair and completed his 8-year term on the committee on December 2022. We acknowledge his tremendous contribution as an advocate on disability rights. Our condolences go to the family, Republic of Nigeria, and indeed, all of us. May Mr. Bashiru's soul rest in perfect peace. This year is the 75th anniversary of universal rights, and the Conference of State Parties provides us an opportunity to United Nations, states, organizations of persons with disabilities, civil society organizations, and all other relevant partners to strengthen efforts to build societies that are more inclusive and accomplish the goal of leaving no one behind. We welcome the overarching theme, harmonizing national policies and strategies with the CRPD, achievements and challenges. To successfully achieve this, it will be necessary to replace the welfare and medical approaches which largely still exist in some states with a human rights model of disability which is embedded in the Convention. 186 ratifications to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities reflect a strong commitment of state parties to our convention. And so, as a committee, we'll congratulate the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights and his office for developing the campaign aimed at reaching the universal ratification of the CRPD and the optional protocol. We hereby encourage member states who have not yet ratified to advance in the ratification to foster equality, autonomy, freedom, and dignity for all. And state parties, we appeal to you to urge colleagues to get this done. I also appeal to state parties to the Convention to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are addressed sufficiently, effectively in the negotiations of the post-2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and thus the 2030 SDG Summit, particularly include a human rights model of disability and is effectively and fully included. We'll also urge that the 2030 agenda recognizes persons with disabilities as subjects of change and not merely recipients of services. This is an opportunity to emphasize the transformation of services in society from institutional care to community-based support, that the call for action in the political declaration will refer to inclusive and support systems based on human rights. A key transformation right that will include us, for example, include the provision of inclusive services, ensure decent work for persons with disabilities in the open labor market, and effective social protection systems. We do acknowledge some of the achievements at the international level, including addressing the situation of persons with disabilities in the voluntary national reviews for the high-level political forum, the UN Disability Inclusive Strategy, the Security Council Resolution 2475 on the protection of persons with disabilities in conflict, the General Assembly Resolution 77/240 on promoting mainstreaming easy-to-understand communication for accessibility for persons with disabilities, and the Human Rights Council Resolution on mental health A/H/C/43/19. However, the committee is concerned about other initiatives, for example, a mental health which is not compliant with the convention. We therefore urge states to implement community-based mental health services with respect to autonomy and will and preferences of persons with disabilities and without coercion. Notable also is the progress made in many state parties, including legislation and strategies to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. But overall, there's a long way to go after holding more than 100 dialogues. We, the committee, is insisting on the importance of active and effective participation of persons with disabilities through their representative organization, including those of women and girls with disabilities, and also in public decision-making, in harmonization efforts in the states. Concerning subtheme 1, among many issues, the committee urged state parties to prohibit harmful practices, including forced sterilization, forced abortion, and forced contraception. The committee also emphasized that states should ensure accessibility and availability of sexual and reproductive health services, information, equipment, and facilities, in particular for women and girls with disabilities, and also to train health professionals to respect the rights of persons with disabilities, to make our choices and decide over our bodies and our sexuality on equal basis with others. In relationship to subtheme 2, the committee calls on the state parties to ensure the accessibility and affordability of assistive devices and technologies, provide financial support, and also for local production, for the local market, and allocate funding to overcome the digital gap. Ensuring access to information and technology is a high priority for all persons with disabilities. For subtopic 3, the committee urges state parties to address multiple and intersectional discrimination against persons with disabilities, including by adopting anti-discriminatory legislation and stopping disability stigma and stereotypes, adopt strategies to empower underrepresented persons with disabilities, and to ensure our inclusion. While all general comments are relevant to the theme, I wish to draw attention to the following to provide guidance to state. General comment 3 on women and girls with disabilities, 5 on the right to live independently in the community and being included in the community. On number 6, on non-discrimination. On 7, on participation of persons with disabilities. 8, on work and employment, as well as our guidelines on deinstitutionalization, including emergencies. I acknowledge the ongoing discussions on care and economy and duty of care, and call upon state parties to take concrete steps towards establishing support and care systems that are gender responsive and disability inclusive. It requires recognizing persons with disabilities as autonomous agencies rather than care recipients. I'm looking forward to meet many of you during the conference and in the various side events. I observe, however, that the requirement to have UN agencies or state parties to sponsor side events and to have side events fully in person poses some challenges to civil societies. His Excellency, President of the Conference and members of the Bureau, we are aware of your Bureau to ensure the participation of organizations of persons with disabilities in this crucial forum. We hope the Conference of State Parties and the Secretariat will be supported with adequate human and technical and financial support that allows participation and online attendance as well. Distinguished Excellencies, I thank you for your rapt attention.
I thank Ms. Oforiwa Fefoame for her statement. Now, I ask Secretariat to screen a video message from Mr. Gerard Quinn, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Secretary-General, President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and participants, my name is Gerard Quinn, and I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I wish to thank the Bureau for the invitation to participate at the opening of the 15th session of the Conference of States Parties. I sincerely regret I cannot be with you in person due to medical advice. This year's themes are incredibly important: sexual and reproductive rights and services, digital access and inclusion, and how to reach underrepresented groups. Given my own work over the past few years, let me dwell for a moment on the second topic. 2 years ago, I published a thematic report focusing on the balance of risks and opportunities posed by artificial intelligence for persons with disabilities. This is probably the issue of our times. Now and again, a revolution of ideas and practices comes along to transform the terms of human coexistence across all domains, whether economic, social, and even political. If the past is any guide, then the trend seems unstoppable. We are indeed at a key inflection point, and this new revolution will have massive implications for persons with disabilities. The advantages are many. As the World Bank has indicated, some development blockages of the past might usefully be undone by AI, thus creating more space for disability-inclusive development. The dream of personalizing and individualizing services now seems within grasp, thus making independent living and community living more readily achievable. AI can contribute to refreshing our social service and care models, which is a pressing priority for the 21st century. The University of Melbourne has pointed out to new and positive applications of AI in the domain of mental health, which can help hasten the end of coercive models. In short, the goal of inclusion based on dignity in the UN CRPD can be made much more meaningfully closer by the intelligent use of artificial intelligence. So the stakes are incredibly high. However, precisely because we value the game-changing nature of the technology, we simply have to be attentive to its downside, whether intended or otherwise. AI is based on machine learning, technology that detects patterns in human behavior, technology that predicts human behavior, and technologies that nudge human behavior to the point of making decisions about persons. Much of this is done without human interaction. Much of it is based on knowledge sets that excludes the reality of persons with disabilities and thus perpetuates stereotypes. Often you, the person, are unaware of the operation of the technology in the background. So when you are disadvantaged, you don't even know you're being disadvantaged and are therefore not in a position to challenge it. Furthermore, machine-based decisions can be made about you by completely sidestepping the jewel in the crown of international disability law, the obligation of reasonable accommodation. Once that core obligation is sidestepped, then the advances in international equality law we have fought so hard for in recent years are simply neutralized. Just to be clear, this is not the traditional privacy agenda, although that's important, and this is not the traditional digital inclusion agenda, making existing technology more widely available to underrepresented groups. This is more fundamentally to do with the transformative power of the new technology to change lives for better or for worse. Persons with disabilities lost out in the third industrial revolution, the internet, from the early 1990s. We've been playing catch-up ever since with ad hoc web accessibility laws. We cannot allow the same to happen with AI, the fourth industrial revolution. If we do, the furthest left behind will simply have no chance to catch up as the 21st century unfolds. We have to be active and present in key debates about major transformations like AI. The disability rights agenda has to be about more than just reacting to particular injustices. It has to be an integral part of how humanity reimagines its own future. That ensures that the social fabric of the future includes persons with disabilities as an integral part of the human family. I am sure we all have a role to play. Civil society, tech developers, tech users, and regulators. And I am sure that COSP will, as usual, generate useful ideas about how to harness the potential of AI whilst mitigating against its side effects. The fact that we're having this debate at all shows the relevance of COSP and connects disability to the broader challenges facing humanity. I wish you great success in your deliberations at COSP. Thank you so much.
I thank Mr. Gerard Quinn for his video message, and I now invite Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, Secretary-General Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, to make her statement, followed by a brief video on maternal health of women with disabilities.
Muy buen.
A very good morning to you all. At the second Summit for Democracy in the United Nations, a global appeal was made to build a better and fairer world for all. In the document, Our Common Agenda, it was indicated that gender and human rights will be cross-cutting issues in fulfilling the SDGs. Given these two approaches, it is very important to bring them together so that I can deal with the sub-theme of this conference, and that is which groups with disabilities are underrepresented. I'm referring particularly to women and girls with disabilities. Historically, they and today should be at the heart of the political debate to ensure the strategic and policy harmonization. UN Women has pointed out that gender equality is currently 300 years away. So I ask you all, will we, women with disabilities, be 600 years away in terms of equality? Today, there's talk of gender trolling. This means silencing women and removing them from public life. So I'd like to ask you, are we, women with disabilities, exposed to a structural gender trolling? Women with disabilities are aware of this. And therefore, we appeal, in fact, we demand that feminist movements include in their work agendas social, political, and economic equality for women and girls with disabilities, and that they include women with disabilities in the management teams. The women's ministries or equivalent ministries include women and girls with disabilities in the gender to coordinate the services provided to overcome barriers and to allow them to enjoy the human rights and the fundamental rights of women with disabilities. And as to the United Nations Commission on the Legal and Social Condition of Women, we do appeal very strongly that it consider broadly and in cross-cutting way women and girls with disabilities. We cannot continue to be just a category or something on the list of your activities. And also the inclusion in the CRPD is part of this. I'd also like to say that the strategy on gender parity in the United Nations has been successful, but it will be even more successful when it is involved and works with UNDIS to ensure that we do have women with disabilities working in the United Nations. I would like to make special mention to persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. As a society, we have significant debts towards these people in terms of deinstitutionalization, elimination of forced treatment, independent living, and inclusion in the community. And all the debt with regards to including them and involving them in this community in an independent way. We are in the era of human rights and not of favors. With regard to the second sub-theme of this conference of parties, we will address digital access. A year ago, in the 15th COSP, we referred to the future for developing a global code of conduct for public information. It will be vital to establish as an axis of this the access on a universal basis and also the availability and affordability of digital technology so that it can be used by all peoples with disabilities. I emphasize that this technology is vital to ensure the fundamental rights and human rights, by ensuring that they are accessible. And it will also enhance the right to being part of the city, to be a citizen. And we have a right to have this and to enjoy this so that we have a dignified life. I'd also like to say that the participation of persons with disabilities and their organizations that represent them in the Summit on the Future will be vital to ensure that this principle is embodied in our work. I'd also like to make special reference to the summary of our common agenda of the United Nations. It makes three important comments. First of all, it refers to a special envoy for future generations. And secondly, it refers to a political statement which would define the responsibilities of states in the future. And the third statement is the creation of an intergovernmental platform to examine the experience of member states in implementing the political statement. I'd like at this stage to say in a very strong way that the political statement should involve and include the perspective of the human rights of persons with disabilities. And this should be based in the CRPD and the Sustainable Development Goals in order to contribute to enhancing the multilateral system. This is the goal of our common agenda. Enhancing the multilateral system will be even better if it includes the enhancing and the empowerment, the citizens' participation of persons with disabilities. If we do not do this, it will mean that millions of people throughout the world will suffer. This must not happen. I'd also like to refer to the sub-theme, sexual and reproduction rights. It's important that the global community should have a model protocol on maternity for women with disabilities. This is crucial, and I highly value the contribution and the testimony of women with disabilities from various parts of the world. I'd also like to ask you to present a video on this subject after this. Now, to close, I'd like to point out that this month my mandate comes to an end. And for that reason, I would like to recognize the Secretary-General, I imagine he is there behind me, for having entrusted to me, a woman with disabilities in the south of our planet, to work especially with women with disabilities on the issue of accessibility. And a particular greetings go to the various members of the Secretariat and the groups of persons with disabilities in civil society and people in general for the demonstrations of support and appreciation with regard to the tough work that we have been implementing. And in closing, I'd like to wish the repose of the soul of Mr. Dalla Vicharo and my condolences to the African continent on his loss. Thank you very much indeed.
Motherhood of women with disabilities. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities promotes access for women and girls with disabilities to quality health services, free or at affordable prices, including sexual and reproductive health. The United Nations 2030 Agenda seeks to guarantee a healthy life and well-being for all, including universal accessibility in health services, family planning, information, education, and the inclusion of reproductive health in national strategies. For these rights to be guaranteed, it is essential to recognize the rights of mothers with disabilities by the state, health personnel, education personnel, and other institutions of society. Guarantee the autonomy of women with disabilities during pregnancy and maternity, including the freedom to make their own decisions, facilitating the exercise of their legal capacity and their free and informed consent. Eliminate forced sterilizations. Recognize the right of women with disabilities to become pregnant and have children, respecting the decision on the number of children they want and the distance between pregnancies. Promote equal, timely, and quality access to residential support services and other accessible services in the community, taking into account the needs and requests of women with disabilities during pregnancy and maternity. Eradicate stereotypes, prejudices, and harmful practices regarding the maternity of women with disabilities. Promote information and communication through sign language and accessible formats such as Braille, audio, text in plain language, easy to read, among others. Encourage accessible care and reasonable accommodation to medical checkups, midwives, ultrasounds, assisted fertilization programs, and examinations in general. Implement adapted childbirth measures, making hospital rules for accompanying persons and visitors more flexible. Promote direct parenting by mothers with disabilities, providing support and reasonable accommodation to facilitate their maternal functions. In no case shall a boy or a girl be separated from their mother due to her disability. For more information, consult the protocol model for the maternity of women with disabilities. Produced by the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary-General on Disability and Accessibility, Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, and the Regional Office for South America of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Dear colleagues, I apologize, I have to leave, and I will hand over for my colleague, Vice President of the Bureau, my colleague from Georgia.
Colleagues, I now invite Mr. Nawaf Kabbara, Civil Society Representative, President of the Arab Organization of Persons with Disabilities of Lebanon, to make a statement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I'm here today representing the disability movement. We are united as a movement to shift from words to action. Action for the people in this room and for the more than 1.3 billion people's rights that we defend. In the last year, since we met, significant progress has been achieved in the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. UN inclusive strategies, the Asian and New Arab decades are examples. These new developments will de facto create a new demand on organizations of persons with disabilities at all levels. We are yet again asking for strategic thinking on how to adequately resource organizations of persons with disabilities to serve as partners to many of the stakeholders, including the UN and member states, as we deliver your commitment to the CRPD and the 2030 Agenda and beyond. Unfortunately, we continue to report on a number of setbacks and obstacles, especially from the implementation of the CRPD and SDGs at the national level. Fiscal constraints are leading to cuts to services for persons with disabilities, and we are deeply concerned about the disproportionate impact of any austerity measures. Implementation of the Agenda 2030 is still not inclusive of persons with disability at the national levels. And with less than 8 years to go until the expiration of the 2030 Agenda, can we really say that the SDGs will leave no one behind? War and climate crisis demonstrated and continue to demonstrate how fragile our response mechanisms are. The humanitarian response to the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, to the Ukraine crisis are just examples. We lost many members from our communities because of lack of planning. We have been shouting these messages for over a decade, but we still face the same problems each time a new crisis emerges. Yesterday, representatives from organizations of persons with disabilities, civil society, government, multilateral organizations, and the private sector met to discuss these challenges and opportunities in advancing the right of persons with disability. We were unanimous in our call to state that we cannot go back on the CRPD, and we must uphold the right to meaningful participation for persons with disabilities, especially at a time when we have a wide range of ongoing intergovernmental processes that touch upon existential matters for persons with disability in all their diversity. We had reflections on what is the current state of play in the implementation of the CRPD. And we look towards a range of important political processes and disability inclusion in development, such as the Summit for the Future and Beyond, the 23 Agenda. we considered how best organizations of persons with disabilities can contribute and act as partners to take advantage of the many positive developments and new commitments by world leaders to enhancing disability inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, collectively, we wish to share the following message. We recognize the need to increase the meaningful involvement of persons with disability and their representative organizations in all decision-making processes, which is not the case yet. We do not want to be added at the end. We are not a checkbox. Involvement should always be at the beginning and the heart of the processes. We call for increased investment and in partnership with a diversity of organizations of persons with disabilities, including, and the most important, the most marginalized groups. We recognize successful practices in capacity building of OPDs and call for such initiatives to receive additional support and to be more widely available. We call for official statistical bodies to collect and disaggregate data about disability, ensure harmonization of disability data, and to recognize OPD-led citizen-generated data to complement data gaps. One day I was asked, how many persons with disability are there in the world? And I said, 6 billion. They asked me how. I said, because every one of us in his or her life will be challenged with a disability one day. We call for the translation of the CRPD into regional and national laws and make our human rights legally anchored. We have all seen and experienced the extraordinary work we can do together. There is a lot to celebrate indeed, but we recognize that more needs to be done. And we look forward to hearing from our leaders as to how you are advancing the right of persons with disabilities in your own context. The promise and indeed the obligation within the CRPD are of a world where persons with disability are fully included, empowered, and their rights respected, protected, and fulfilled. This can only be achieved through collaborative efforts and unwavering determination. We never forget that the primary obligation is on state parties, but we all share an important role in advancing societal transformation. Each and every one of us must be agent of change, helping to break down the barriers, ending exclusion forever. And I will add from my own account, ending wars that is costing billions and billions of dollars that if we have invested in development, for sure we would have been in a much, much inclusive, better world. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Nawaf Kabbara for his statement, and now I kindly invite Mr. Ghanim al-Muftah, youth representative, to speak, followed by a video.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you. I am Ghanim al-Muftah, a 21 years old political science major with a physical disability. My Arabic name Ghanim translates into a winner. It is with esteemed pride that I share my most humble yet significant insight into my world, representation, inclusion, and participation for people with disabilities. Speaking peacefully from the heart is the most sincere way to communicate. Using peace as a driving force can highlight equal and respectful treatment for people with disabilities. Qatar's goal during the World Cup was inclusion for people with disabilities worldwide to attend. And we succeeded in making the World Cup one of the most successful sporting events for people with disabilities. Accessible infrastructure and technological improvements were implemented successfully. We are now addressing ways to provide a fully comprehensive barrier-free environment related to education, employment, social and cultural sector. Equality and respect for others directs us in our active quest for improvements for people with disabilities. Qatar has announced its readiness to host the Global Summit for Disability in 2028 in solid collaborations with the International Disability Alliance. Though it is very early, allow me to invite you all to attend this most prestigious summit in 2028 in Qatar. Come and witness a true millennium reality to prove our commitment and dedication for people with disabilities. And now, I invite you all to watch a video clip from the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 opening ceremony. Thank you for this distinguished, most honorable opportunity to speak with you today. Peace be upon you.
I heard something beautiful. Not just music, but also this call to celebration. This is all so new. All that I have known before was a land that seemed to be in turmoil, with families who were forgotten. And I stopped hearing your voice.
Come on over.
I'm not sure. Am I welcome?
We sent out the call because everyone is welcome. This is an invitation to the whole world.
I remember, even after hearing the call, instead of seeing another way, we dismissed it and demanded our own way. And now, the world feels even more distant and divided. How can so many countries, languages, and cultures come together if only one way is accepted?
يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. We were raised to believe that we were scattered on this earth as nations and tribes so we could learn from each other and find beauty in our differences.
I can see it. What unites us here in this moment is so much greater than what divides us. How can we make it last longer than just today?
With tolerance and respect, we can live together under one big home. In Arabic, Beit al-Sha'ar is the Bedouin tent. Wherever it is built, that is home. And when we call you here, we welcome you into our home.
So we gather here as one big tribe, and Earth is the tent we all live in.
Yes, and together, we can send out the call for all the world to join us.
ألف مليون هلا بالله
I thank His Excellency António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, His Excellency Csaba, President of the General Assembly, and all distinguished speakers for their statements. I now kindly invite the Secretary to make an announcement concerning documents, accessibility arrangements, and other practical information about the conference.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, Secretary would like to make a short announcement. To support full participation by delegates and all other participants, Secretary publishes relevant information, including very practical arrangement details, like an audit program, including the program in easy-to-understand format, and also an informational note for participants, are all available online in our COSP website, www.un.org/disability. And we will continue updating relevant information at above website. Regarding documentation, the conference has following 4 official documents, including provisional agenda and 3 background paper for 3 roundtable discussions. All of these the documents are made available in 6 official UN languages and are posted in both UN ODS and also Enable website I mentioned earlier. In terms of accessibility, the United Nations and this COSP committed to promoting accessibility. The Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, in collaboration with Department of Management and Department of General Assembly and Conference Management, DGSM, are facilitating accessibility requirements of delegates and other participants at this conference. Based on requests that we received, accessibility arrangements are made by the Secretariat. For example, modification of some seats in this room to accommodate accessibility needs of participants who use wheelchairs. Also, international sign interpretation and closed caption subtitling services, as you can see, are all available during the 6 meetings of this session. A certain number of copies of the 4 official documents are produced in Braille and also large print formats to meet the specific needs of some delegations who inform us of their needs. Delegations who have requested in advance but have not yet received your copy of these documents in Braille or large prints, please kindly claim your copy at the document booth in this room. That is behind, in the back area of this venue. All of these need but not notify Secretary before the deadline we announced. Please kindly visit the UN Accessibility Center anytime during the session to make your ad hoc request. For example, asking producing Braille copy on demand. The Accessibility Center located in the same floor of the conference conference rooms will assist as much as they can. And finally, I would like just kindly draw your attention. This session, the 60th session of the Conference Day Party, is a paper smart meeting. All delegations wishing to post their full statements for the general debate are kindly requested to send you a copy of your finalized states in Word and PDF format, which are more accessible, by emailing to e-statements@un.org. No later than 3 hours before the meeting, you will be speaking. Statements sent to this above email address, e-statements@un.org, will be posted in the UN Journal after delivery and should be also recognized in the official record and report of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary, for your announcement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to item 5A on the agenda, which is general debate. Inscription to the general debate was initially announced during the informal briefing on the preparations of the conference on 28th of April. An announcement of the general debate was accordingly placed in the UN Journal. The speakers list was open for inscription via e-delegate portal between 22nd May and 6 June and was closed by 6 p.m. of 5th June. Colleagues, I would like to draw your kind attention to the rules of speaking time limits, that is 5 minutes for a national statement and 5 minutes for joint statement on behalf of group of states. 3 minutes for a national statement and 5 minutes for joint statement on behalf of group of states. The rule is anticipated in the guidance note that has been communicated with and agreed already by all delegates by consensus. A copy of this guidance note has been shared broadly well in advance of the opening of this session. Notably, it was shared during Chair's informal briefing on 12th May. And it is also published in both the devoted COSP16 website and the UN Journal. The Bureau has tasked Chair to enforce this rule robustly to manage the time. In my capacity as the acting president of the meeting, I kindly call upon all speakers for your cooperation in strictly observing these rules, especially the speaking time limits for all speakers. By abiding to the time limit, you will collectively contribute to safeguarding the substantive character of the conference. For this purpose, a technical mechanism is put in place for this meeting. Therefore, all speakers are kindly suggested to try wrapping up your statement before the end of your allocated speaking time limit, or the speaker's microphone will be cut off automatically. As announced earlier, delegations can and are encouraged to avail themselves of the opportunity to post a full text of their statements by emailing to estatements@un.org. This means all you have prepared for your full texts will be shared in its entirely online. Please be assured that the official report of the session will also recognize all written statements submitted and published in the UN Journal under the agenda item General Debate. Finally, in terms of the order of speakers, principle of first come, first serve, as well as applicable UN protocols will be respected. This means that all efforts will be made to accommodate those inscribed speakers above ministerial level. Following the long tradition and practice of our conference and considering the importance of hearing the voices and contributions from stakeholders, especially representative organizations of persons with disabilities, the Bureau agreed that after every 5 state parties spoke, we may invite 1 representative from accredited NGO, 1 UN entity, and 1 national human rights institutions to take the floor, and this shall continue in between every 5 member states. With this, I would like to recognize Australia on behalf of MICTA, Her Excellency Amanda Rishworth. So she is the first on my list of speakers, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative from Australia to deliver a statement for 5 minutes. Excellency, you have the floor.
Vice President, I have the honour to deliver this statement on behalf of the MICTA countries, Mexico, Indonesia, the Republic of Korea, Turkey and Australia. We recognise with appreciation the efforts of the Bureau, which has worked to enable this in-person conference to discuss harmonising national policies and strategies with the CRPD with a cross-cutting focus on achievements and challenges. Vice President, as MICTA countries, we seek to uphold the general principles of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that respect, protect and promote the rights of persons with disabilities, inter alia the respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices, the independence of persons, non-discrimination, and the full and effective participation and inclusion in society. We recognise that persons with disabilities face greater challenges in attaining the full enjoyment of their human rights and fundamental freedoms. In this regard, we are concerned that persons with psychosocial disabilities continue to be subject to widespread and multiple forms of discrimination, social exclusion, violence, institutionalisation, and treatment practices that fail to respect their individual autonomy, will and preferences. Women and girls with disability, including women and girls with psychosocial disabilities, face an increased vulnerability to violence, abuse, discrimination, and negative stereotyping at all ages. State parties should adopt, implement, strengthen or monitor, as appropriate, existing laws, policies and practices in line with international human rights obligations, and should take active steps to fully integrate and strengthen a human rights perspective into services for persons with disabilities. Effective mental health and psychosocial support services should respect, protect and fulfil the human rights, individual autonomy, will and preferences of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Such services should promote their right to full and effective inclusion and participation in society, to decide upon matters affecting them, and to have their dignity respected on an equal basis with others. We therefore call on all state parties to continue to take forward this through community, evidence and human rights-based services and support that respect, protect and fulfil the human rights, individual autonomy, will and preferences of persons with disabilities, including persons with psychosocial disabilities, on an equal basis with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. I now kindly invite distinguished representative from Iceland, the Minister of Social Affairs and the Labour Market, Mr. Gudmundur Ingi Gubrandts. You have the floor.
Madam President, I have the honor of speaking on behalf of a cross-regional group of 66 countries. I would first like to sincerely thank the Bureau for selecting equal access to and accessibility of sexual and reproductive health services for persons with disabilities as one of the conference sub-themes. This is a historic occasion, as this is the first time sexual and reproductive health and rights are discussed at the conference roundtable. Persons with disabilities have the same rights as all other persons, including the rights to education and health, and therefore to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Yet, they continue to face discrimination and exclusion in realizing these rights. Persons with disabilities face barriers in accessing information about sexual and reproductive health and services. They face physical, environmental, and attitudinal barriers to accessibility of health services, facilities, equipment, and transportation. Pervasive stigma, harmful stereotypes, and social norms and prejudice cause structural and systemic discrimination of persons with disabilities, putting them at risk of serious human rights violation. Persons with disabilities face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, including due to their disability, but also based on their gender, age, race, and ethnicity. As a result, especially women and girls with disabilities are often prevented from making informed decisions about many aspects of their lives, are perceived as unfit to be parents, and also face increased risk for sexual and gender-based violence, abuse, and exploitation. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities guarantees the right to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health, including equal access to sexual and reproductive health services. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women further protects the rights of women and girls with disabilities to sexual and reproductive health. States parties are obliged to take measures to ensure access for persons with disabilities to health services, including health facilities. In this regard, we want to underline that access and accessibility of information and education on sexual reproductive health and services and the fulfillment of related rights are crucial. Sexual and reproductive health is at the core of sustainable development and of the implementation of the CRPD through inclusive development for and with persons with disabilities. Furthermore, the Agenda 2030 sets clear targets for leaving no one behind and achieving universal access to sexual and reproductive health services for all. Discriminatory and harmful laws, policies, and practices must be eliminated. States parties must meet their obligations under the Convention and take proactive measures to ensure that all persons with disabilities have equal access to sexual and reproductive health and education. Advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights of persons with disabilities at this critical conference is a welcome step. But we must do more. We must ensure that these rights are advanced more broadly in the normative work of the United Nations. To do this, we can take advantage of and continue developing innovative, accessible technologies and inclusive solutions to ensure that no one is left behind. Most importantly, we must meaningfully engage with all persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, particularly women and girls with disabilities, including creating opportunities for them to serve in key leadership roles at all levels in order to ensure that decisions are informed by their expertise, insight, and experience. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And now I invite distinguished representative from Tunisia, Minister of Social Affairs, His Excellency Malek Zahi, to deliver his statement. You have the floor, Excellency.
Mr. President of the Conference, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Tunis has always been keen on dedicating the principles of human rights and in a holistic, comprehensive perspective that addresses various social segments and groups, including people with disabilities. The Tunisian legislation, when it comes to providing care for people with disabilities, is now a rich lore that has laid down the foundations for a rights-based system that is in tandem with international standards, and also it's an ethical and moral reference for a sound social upbringing and education, which reflects that the state is fully aware of the need to fully engage and include people with disabilities. Tunis has always been keen on providing the digital accessibility for people with disabilities, particularly through laying down the foundations and platforms like e-handicap with dedicated service centers in this regard. Now, with regards to access to underrepresented groups of people with disabilities, Tunisia would like to provide full support that would ensure the full engagement of such segments and civil society organizations representing them. And hence we established the International Center for the Advancement of Rights of People with Disabilities with branches across the Republic in order to emphasize the role of the state to provide the specialized educational services for people with disabilities and to enable them and empower them and access training opportunities to build their skills and to unleash their potential so that they can fully be included in public life and to equally contribute like other segments of society in the development process across the country, such as innovating a customized car, a vehicle that is customized for the use of people with disabilities, which has been invented by the physically disabled young female Khadija Al-Udwi from Tunisia. The new vision of the social policy in Tunisia dedicates the social role of the welfare state that should be providing care for all segments of societies, including the poor, the vulnerable, and people with disabilities. And it is keen upon providing equal opportunities and access to treatment, decent life, and employment. Finally, as we reiterate our obligation and commitment to remain steadfast to act on all recommendations that will be produced by the conference, and the mic is off.
For your statement. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative from Sri Lanka, Minister of Social Empowerment, His Excellency Anupapeu Pascual. You have the floor.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Sri Lanka, it's a pleasure to address the 16th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the CRPD. It is of added significance that this year Sri Lanka serves as a Vice President of the Bureau. Sri Lanka became a signatory to the UN CRPD by ratifying the Convention on February 2016. Madam Vice President, Sri Lanka has submitted the first national report on UN CRPD in 2018, and it's under review, and we hope to work more closely in the review process and beyond. Sri Lanka has protected the rights of the PWDs since 1978 by its second Republican Constitution, through its Human Rights Chapter, and then by the Act of 1996 as well. Under the provisions of 1996 Act, the National Council and the first ever Secretariat for the PWDs was established. In order to comprehensively address matters relating to the rights of PWDs, a new bill has been drafted, which includes an independent monitoring mechanism as an oversight body in accordance with the CRPD. The rights enshrined in the Convention are protected by the new bill, and also it is expected to be passed in Parliament very soon. Sri Lanka published its national policy for PWDs in 2003 and upgraded and developed the National Action Plan. Madam Vice President, Sri Lankan government has also taken a number of legal and policy measures by establishing an accessibility regulations in 2006 and white cane rules to enhance mobility for the blind and the visually impaired community in Sri Lanka in 2017. The Sign Language Bill has been drafted for the rights of the deaf and hearing impaired community in Sri Lanka. The Visually Impaired Rehabilitation Trust Fund plays a significant role in assisting persons with visual impairments. Sri Lanka is committed to taking further measures to integrate its disabled community so that they participate as full-fledged citizens in the life of the nation. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And now I invite distinguished representative from Morocco, Minister of Solidarity, Social Integration and the Family, His Excellency Avatif Hayar, to deliver his statement via pre-recorded video.
Excellency Secretary-General of the United Nations, Excellency President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, delegates, representatives of the Member States, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Kingdom of Morocco, I am pleased to express our thanks and appreciation for the Secretary-General and the members of the Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities for all their efforts in order to further promote and protect the rights of people with disabilities. On this occasion, I'd like to reiterate the Kingdom of Morocco's commitment to enhance the collaboration with all United Nations bodies engaged in human rights, particularly in order to implement the provisions of the Convention. The Kingdom of Morocco, under the auspices and leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, has always expressed its dedication in order to protect the rights of people with disabilities by becoming a signatory to the Convention and its additional protocol in 2007, ratifying it in 2009, and also it has issued a public integrated policies for the advancement of the rights of people with disabilities. Also, the government of Morocco has also engaged in preparing the second, third, and fourth reports for review on the implementation of the Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Morocco continues its efforts in order to streamline the national policies and strategy with the Convention through preparing an assessment national study to monitor all the activities on advancement of the rights of people with disabilities. And also this study has revealed that it's of a limited nature so far in order to engage them in economic life. And also the overall national 5-year plan of 22 to 26 focuses on prevention of the reasons of disability, creating a conducive environment for accessibility, and also to provide economic empowerment and showing solidarity. And also we have established a new regime that would define and adopt legally the definition of the disability as provided for in the Convention. And also we are working on issuing a new ID cards for people with disabilities in this regard. And following the directives by His Majesty King Mohammed VI, we have adopted a new law on social protection in May of 2021, and also we have increased the budget allocations to help the NGOs and associations working with people with disabilities, and also we've introduced a quota with regards to the employment of people with disabilities in the private sector. And also the Kingdom of Morocco shall remain committed to contribution of the international efforts and collaboration with the Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities in order to expedite the implementation of their international commitments in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, per decided by the Bureau, I now recognize and invite the representative from International Disability Alliance to make a statement from the designated seat for NGO speakers. You have the floor.
Excellencies, it is my honor to address you on behalf of the International Disability Alliance, an alliance of 14 global and regional organizations of persons with disabilities and their families, representing over 1,000 organizations and 1.3 billion persons with disabilities worldwide. Today, as we reflect on the progress made and the challenges that lie ahead, we must acknowledge that the journey towards full and effective inclusion of persons with disabilities is far from complete. While significant strides have been made, we still encounter physical, attitudinal, and systemic barriers that limit our opportunities, restrict our rights, and perpetuate exclusion. We are deeply worried at the state of the world in 2023. International crises have shown us how easily our human rights and access needs can be cast aside. We saw this during the COVID pandemic, and we are seeing it now during climate, economic, and other crises around the world. It is vital that the rights of persons with disabilities are incorporated into all humanitarian action. But the reality in conflict zones across the world today is a tragic reminder that we must again plead with the international community to fulfill the CRPD Article 11 on situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies and fully implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2475 dealing with protecting the rights of persons with disabilities in armed situations. Climate change is another pressing issue that demands our immediate attention. Its adverse effects, such as extreme weather events and rising sea levels, disproportionately impact persons with disabilities with insufficient remedies. Colleagues, we have less than 8 years left to meet the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. IDA recognizes the work that your government did to ensure that persons with disabilities were included in the 2030 Agenda. Yet we are concerned that the implementation has not been sufficiently inclusive of persons with disabilities. We are yet to see the impact at grassroots levels. We urge you to consider what you can do in coming years to ensure that we do not fail persons with disabilities. That, for example, disability-inclusive funding is provided. We must be different in the next 8 years. Finally, let us seize this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the rights of persons with disabilities, and let us build a future where persons with disabilities are fully included in society. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And now I give the speaking opportunity to Canadian Human Rights Commission on behalf of Ghanim. You have the floor.
Excellencies, on behalf of the members and observers of the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions Working Group on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Canadian Human Rights Commission is pleased to deliver this statement to the 16th session of the Conference of States Parties. The COVID-19 pandemic further exposed the extent of diverse, intersecting, and aggravated forms of discrimination experienced by people with disabilities. It also emphasized the importance of an intersectional, disability-inclusive response designed in collaboration with the disability community to leave no one behind. We showed that we are capable of flexibility and that we can fulfill our responsibilities to each other when we have the will to do so. In some areas, technology enhanced the participation and well-being of people with disabilities. For example, where there was increased access to flexible work environments, virtual participation, and accessible technology. However, states must also respond to potential human rights harms arising in today's technological landscape and resulting in increased inequities or exploitation of marginalized groups. Today, the health, safety, and well-being of many people with disabilities remains at risk, as well as their right to live independently with adequate support and be included in their communities. It is critical that policymakers are intentional about including people with disabilities in the decisions that impact them. As we have seen, it is easy to return to institutional conventions and backslide on progress. Transformation for the better demands a will to protect and promote the autonomy and agency of people with disabilities and to guarantee their full and meaningful participation in society. We encourage states to work alongside people with disabilities of diverse identities and experiences to ensure underrepresented voices are included. Indigenous peoples, racialized people, children and youth, people living in institutions, 2S LGBTQIA+ people, people living in poverty, and many other voices all must be included in the decision-making process. Institutional norms must change to better reflect and acknowledge the contributions, needs, and preferences of people with disabilities. To this end, we call on states to redouble efforts to reach those who remain on the margins. We encourage states to invest in their capacity and to facilitate their inclusion. As the world regains its footing, we look forward to shaping an inclusive and accessible future where no one is left behind. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. And I now give the speaking opportunity to UNOPS. You have the floor.
It's my honor to represent AT-Scale, the Global Partnership for Assistive Technology, hosted by UNOPS. I first addressed this important conference last year, and since then, we've already witnessed a growing momentum to increase access to assistive technology. But much, much more needs to be done to reach at least 500 million people with life-changing assistive technology by 2030. It is a moral imperative. We must address the current inequity in access if we are to reach the SDGs. Indeed, we've heard without true inclusion, we will never reach the SDGs. And we cannot have true inclusion if we can't make sure the most basic forms of assistive technology are available to those who need it. My message today to all of you is simple. First of all, increasing access to AD is not just the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. We know that there is an economic return of a 9-to-1 for all dollars invested in assistive technology. It brings benefits to better education outcomes, employment opportunities, and lifelong better health. Secondly, much more funding is needed. Governments need to take responsibility to increase their budgets and ensure full social protection to those who need it. We must find ways to decrease catastrophic out-of-pocket expenditures that today weigh on so many of those who need assistive technology. ODA, Official Development Assistance, allocations must prioritize this as well, and we must get the private sector and innovative financing mechanisms to step up. Last but not least, I would like to say this. Together, and only together, can we succeed through collective action and coordination under strong government leadership. And we, together with other partners, will follow that leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I now kindly invite distinguished representative from Canada, Minister of Empowerment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion, Her Excellency Carla Qualtrough. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, Excellencies, representatives, and delegates. As Canada's Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion, and as a person with a disability, it's an honour to represent Canada at the 16th Conference of the State Parties to the UN CRPD. Au Canada, nous croyons que tout le monde...
In Canada, we believe that everybody deserves to live an enriching life without any obstacles. We believe that everybody has the right to fully participate and be included in all aspects of society. And we believe that if these rights were fully respected, societies and economies would be prosperous. However, throughout our history, policies and the services have been set up without taking into account peoples with disabilities.
Committed to addressing this historical wrongdoing, to moving from exclusion to inclusion. Not only are we proactively addressing the barriers being faced by persons with disabilities in Canada, but we are also building a system of laws, policies, and processes that are disability inclusive. I'm proud to report that our work under the Accessible Canada Act to identify, eliminate, and prevent accessibility barriers is ongoing. Our first ever Chief Accessibility Officer for the Government of Canada is hard at work, as is the Accessibility Commissioner at our Canadian Human Rights Commission. Last October, I introduced Canada's first ever Disability Inclusion Action Plan. This action plan has 4 initial pillars identified by the disability community: financial security, employment, accessible and inclusive communities, and a modern approach to disability. Under the pillar of financial security, we are about to make history in our country. Legislation is currently making its way through our Parliament to create a Canada Disability Benefit, which will be a monthly direct payment to working-age, low-income persons with disabilities in Canada. This benefit will become a permanent fixture in our social safety net and has the potential to lift hundreds of thousands of Canadians out of poverty. In the area of employment, we are creating a national employment strategy for persons with disabilities. This strategy aims to support individuals in finding meaningful employment or pursue entrepreneurship, to build disability confidence within the business community and support employers to make their workplaces more disability inclusive, and to support disability organizations. Earlier this month was National Accessibility Week in Canada, a legislated annual event where we celebrate the contributions of persons with disabilities and where we recommit to the work that still lies ahead. In this spirit, I offer the unwavering support of Canada in our collective global efforts to address disability discrimination, to advance inclusion, and build a world where the contributions of every single person are valued and celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. And I now kindly invite the representative from Australia, Minister for Social Services, Her Excellency Amanda Rishworth. You have the floor.
Thank you, Vice President. Australia's modern identity is one of rich heritage, home to more than 300 ancestries, and the world's oldest continuing culture of Australia's First Nations people. More than 1 in 6 Australians have disability. The Australian Government has committed under Australia's Disability Strategy 2021 to 31 to create an inclusive community in which all people with disability can participate as equal members of society. This commitment is based on respect for the diversity of people with disability. This commitment tailors actions to take account of this diversity, including gender equality, and involves people with disability in the design and delivery of policies, programs, and services that affect them. Australia is fortunate to have many non-government organisations representing the diverse interests of people with disability, including underrepresented groups. We work with these organisations to understand the lived experience of people with disability and to improve the services for them. For example, we work in partnership with First Nations People Disability Network, an organisation governed by First Nations Australians with lived experience of disability, to develop a national framework to build a First Nations community-controlled sector where sustainable, high-quality services are delivered by First Nations-owned service providers. The Australian Government is also strengthening the representation of Australia's First Nations people with disability across all policy areas to ensure their needs, expectations and priorities are met. Vice President, Australia has responded to the diverse needs of people with an intellectual disability by developing a national roadmap for improving the health of people with intellectual disability, to improve access to services and support. To support the roadmap, we are also establishing a National Centre of Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health, bringing together people with disability, experts, resources and research on intellectual disability health care. Disability equity and realising the rights of people with disability is a cross-cutting priority of Australia's international engagement. Over the next year, Australia will develop an international disability equity and rights strategy to guide our international engagement, including in human rights, development cooperation.
Thank you, Excellency. And I now invite distinguished representative from Italy, Minister for Disabilities, Her Excellency Alessandra Losatelli. You have the floor.
Dear Chair, distinguished delegates, Italy is carrying out an important reform on disability. We have long started a process of inclusion and full participation in the daily lives of persons with disabilities. The CRPD became law in my country in 2009, and we are implementing all the principles of the Convention through norms, measures, reform, and directly involving the different institutional levels, associations, education and the third sector, as required by our national laws. But what I would like to stress today is Italy's great commitment to reversing the order of policy priorities, putting persons and caregivers at the center of them, demonstrating that in order to strengthen our community is essential to invest in the talents, in the skill, and everyone, so as to offer and guarantee opportunities and chances in training and work, in sports, in recreational life, as well as in the effective and relational sphere. The great qualitative leap that we are required to make, all of us, quickly, is to develop the LIFE project for every person with disability, aiming to give continuity, dignity, and freedom of choice to each of them. Our commitment has been relentless to guarantee all children and young persons with disabilities the right to education, the right to be able to go to school, to receive training, and to enter the world of work without discrimination, like for everyone else and together with everyone else. We should strive to ensure rights and the protection for women with disabilities. With the candidacy of Rome to host the Universal Exposition in 2030, we target a year for the Sustainable Development Goals, we are convinced that we can build moments of real and human exchange on the topic of inclusion. We are all persons, just persons. We are all different, but always with the same rights. And for this reason, together, we can do more and more, promoting everyone's right to dignified life through concrete action together with Association of Persons with Disabilities and the third sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. And now I would like to invite distinguished representative from Latvia, Minister for Welfare of the Republic of Latvia, Her Excellency Evika Silina. You have the floor.
President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Latvia is honored to be among the state parties where humanity, dignity, and equality are seriously taken values. Respect for these values is vital globally and nationally in planning and implementing policy measures to promote the inclusion of persons with disabilities in society. Latvia has set a clear shift in the development of disability policy, from a medical model to a human rights-based approach. It emphasizes the active involvement of a person in public processes and living an independent life. The overall goal of disability policy in Latvia is in line with the Convention's objective to promote, protect, and ensure that persons with disabilities can fully and equally enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms, to promote respect for human dignity and take measures to reduce the consequences of disability. Nonetheless, implementing the Convention and harmonizing national policies is a continuous process. New commitments are necessary to adapt to changing requirements and challenges, such as digital transformations. Our shared goal is to create a community where everyone feels included and can grow and develop. Latvia fully supports the current session themes: equal access to sexual and reproductive health services, digital accessibility for persons with disabilities, and reaching underrepresented groups. Addressing these shared challenges and exchanging good practices are vital for meaningful improvements in the lives of persons with disabilities across the world. Latvia has paid a lot of attention of raising public awareness and support the rights of persons with disabilities. Latvia invests significant work to promote the accessibility of built environment, products and services to ensure that accessibility for persons with disabilities is not a special issue, but everyday practice. Referring to Russia's war in Ukraine and its devastating impact of most vulnerable groups, Latvia provides targeted assistance to Ukrainian citizens with disabilities, refugees, and the war-injured, considering as much as possible their individual needs. Dear participants, we are committed to continue all the activities that are necessary to build an understanding and support measures for people with disabilities, accepting diversity, ensuring equal opportunities, promoting social innovations, and being ready for the demands of modern society as a mutual gain for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And I now invite distinguished representative from Ireland to deliver statement via pre-recorded video.
Dear President, Secretary-General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I'm delighted to be able to address this year's Conference of State Parties to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I am the Irish Minister of State with responsibility for disability, and for those who might not be able to physically see me, I am wearing a navy blazer, a white blouse, and I have a pearl necklace around my neck. I have also glasses on my head. The theme of this year's conference invites us to consider ways in which we can look to harmonise our national policies and strategies with the CRPD, placing a particular emphasis on reflecting on achievements, but also identifying challenges associated with the continued implementation of the Convention. For our part in Ireland, we continue to realise our commitments under the Convention. Domestically, we are reviewing our disability health service plans. We recently changed our laws on decision-making capacity. We have doubled the statutory target for employing people with disabilities in the public service, and we are reviewing our equality legislation and our laws on educational requirements for persons with disabilities. Around the world, we continue to advocate for and with people with disabilities. In terms of strategies, Ireland's National Disability Inclusion Strategy concluded at the end of 2022. This strategy saw many successes and brought about systemic changes in multiple respects. Its achievements will be built upon in a successor strategy which is being developed this year. The priorities pursued under the new disability strategy will be developed collaboratively across government and with people with disabilities and their representative organisations. The sub-themes discussed at COSP this year are critical enablers of progress for us in this regard. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate my thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Ireland's delegation looks forward to sharing our experiences and learning from those of others at what I am sure will be an engaging and informative conference. Garamagif.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to NGO International Disability and Development Consortium. You have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Nadia Haddad, and I'm speaking on behalf of the International Disability and Development Consortium. IDDC promotes inclusive international development and humanitarian action with a focus on the full and effective enjoyment of human rights for all persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities are hugely diverse, and some are underrepresented, such as persons with psychosocial, intellectual disabilities, persons affected by leprosy, persons with deaf blindness, and those living in institutions, hospitals, and other forms of segregated settings. Persons with disabilities are also diverse in their intersecting identities and characteristics, facing intersecting and multiple forms of discrimination. Women with disabilities represent 1/5 of the world's population, yet they face unique and pervasive barriers realizing their rights and access to sexual and reproductive health and support services. In fact, 20% of them have never used such a service. Digital accessibility and inclusion are essential for persons with disability to access vital information and other resources, especially in emergency. 80% of them live in the Global South, and 90% do not have sufficient access to the assistive technologies they require and face barriers to regular mobile internet use. At this conference of state parties, we call on states to step up efforts to deliver the convention, including by laying the foundation for inclusion so that when crisis hits, persons with disability are not disproportionately impacted. Ensuring adequate financial resources are allocated for the implementation of the CRPD, including by providing financial resources directly to OPDs. Measuring and monitoring inclusion and progress, and setting ambitious targets with clear accountability mechanism to ensure the realization of the Convention. New tools include the use of the UCAT DAC disability inclusion marker, integrating validated and internationally comparable disability data collection tools into census and surveys, and recognizing citizen-generated data from OPDs. Urging the implementation of the CRPD guidelines on deinstitutionalization, even in emergency situations. And finally, ensuring that the global and the UN processes, such as the upcoming high-level political forum, the SDG summit, and the Summit of the Future, ensure the meaningful engagement with organizations of persons with disability and adequately reflect the need to step up progress toward the CRPD and deliver concrete actions for change. IDDC, all members and partners are ready to work with the member state in this regard. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your statement. And I now give the speaking opportunity to the Office of the Public Defender, Ombudsman of Georgia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm honored to have the opportunity to represent Public Defender of Georgia and share information as well as the concerns related to the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Georgia. Just a quick note, the PDO is an A-status national human rights institution which supervises the protection of human rights and freedoms in Georgia. The PDO has been appointed as an independent mechanism for monitoring, promoting, and protecting the implementation of the CRPD. The office has been very active and gathered valuable information and number of recommendations concerning implementation of the convention. As naturally being in my capacity as a representative on NHRI, I will more focus on challenges existing in the process of implementation of the convention. It's also important to mention that only recently the UN CRPD committee has reviewed Georgia's initial report and submitted relevant recommendations to the state. The PDO represented actually alternative information, and many of our recommendations has been reflected in the committee's approach, and it's a huge tool for us to continue advocating for required changes. Despite very positive and important steps taken by government towards harmonization of legislation with the UN CRPD and adoption of the law of Georgia on the rights of persons with disabilities, challenges still remain in practice. Despite the relevant obligation, there is no developed long-term strategy and a separate action plan for the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. The General Human Rights State Strategy for 2022 to 2030 does not fully cover all aspects of human rights protection of persons with disabilities, and detailed action plan must be adopted as soon as possible with engagement of the persons with disabilities. Despite the changes, as I said, some problems are still faced in practice. Actually, the state has to take all measures to reflect in practice the positive legal regulations that have been adopted for persons with disabilities, and a lot of course, engagement and involvement of the persons with disabilities in decision-making have to be ensured. When I talk about the problems in practice, I mean accessibility of physical environment, accessibility to medical services due to lack of adapted facilities, including sexual and reproductive health, also introduction of biopsychosocial model, lack of access to information, as no information accessibility standard has been created so far. Persons with disabilities are prevented from receiving complete and quality information in a proper form. Equality is not guaranteed because of low awareness on the rights of persons with disabilities, existing stigma, especially toward persons with a mental health problem, lack of supporting and individualized services, and etc. Inclusive education, preparing children with disabilities placed in state care to live independently, support recipient and supporters program, despite very important reform of legal capacity implemented in Georgia in 2015, equal recognition before the law.
Thank you for your statement. And I now give the speaking opportunity to UNICEF. You have the floor.
This is Fernando Botelho from UNICEF, Program Division, Disability Section. I'd like to share with all member states and participants that UNICEF is building the capacity to provide assistive technology products through its supply division and assist member states in the procurement process to ensure that the quality of the assistive technology being procured is of the highest level, as well as to ensure that the services that are available surrounding the products is also adequate. One of the classic difficulties faced in most low and middle income countries is that services are not always available to support the fitting, the selection, the prescription, the purchasing, the repair, and the maintenance of assistive technologies. I would like to also emphasize that there are opportunities that are being missed. For example, over the last 10 to 15 years, there has been a dramatic improvement in the types and diversity of assistive technology products available in digital form through devices such as smartphones. However, even though the capacity, the capabilities available through these devices has improved and the prices have been reduced dramatically, there has not been an equivalent increase in access to such assistive technology by persons with disabilities around the world. It is important for governments that are developing or have developed national assistive technology product lists to include smartphones. We must, yes, always look at all that we are still missing and not doing properly, but we must also take advantage of the large advances that have taken place throughout our industries and build on those strengths. Build on those strengths so that people that today are not being able to participate, to communicate, to have access to education, and to work can benefit from the developments that have been so tremendous in the area of digital technology. So I'd like to encourage that these products that are mass-produced, that have been developed in many cases and with consideration of universal design principles, and that can offer an unprecedented level of access for persons with disabilities, that these be...
Thank you for your statement. And now I would like to invite distinguished representative from France to deliver the statement. You have the floor.
Merci. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice President. France is delighted to take part in this Conference of State Parties. I would like to remind you that respect for the fundamental rights of persons with disabilities is a duty for us all. My thoughts go to all those who have been victims of Russian aggression against Ukraine and in other armed conflicts everywhere else. France will continue to work to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. For each state, the observations of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities provide a compass. It is this rights-based approach that guides our work. The President of our Republic, Emmanuel Macron, recalled this fact on the 26th of April this year at the National Conference on Disability. The watchwords are free choice, simplifying daily life, autonomy, while ensuring the protection of the physical and mental health of persons with disabilities. For that reason, we must support children as early in life as possible. France made the choice in 2018 to act in support of children with autism spectrum disorder to enhance their autonomy and avoid added handicaps. This approach has been successful, and we will extend it to all children with disabilities between 0 and 6 years. we must also support school attendance outside of specialized institutions. Since 2017, the number of children with a disability who go to school with other children has increased by 34%. We hope to continue this trend by enhancing the presence in schools of medical and social professional workers. After school, employment is essential. Full employment affects all citizens, and our efforts are working. Unemployment amongst persons with disabilities decreased from 19% in 2017 to 12% in 2023, but it's still twice as much as the rest of the population. And we're doing more to work with private sector and public sector workers to ensure the insertion in the labour force of persons with disabilities and also ensure their rights wherever they work. We will also step up accessibility, and we will allocate 1.5 billion euros to accessibility to public areas, in particular small businesses. And finally, we support autonomy. We have contributed 971 euros to people with disabilities, whatever be the status of their spouse. I'd like to conclude by referring to the 2024 Paralympic and Olympic Games, which are important for us. Thank you.
Your statement. And I now would like to invite distinguished representative from Malta to deliver statement via pre-recorded video.
President, Malta aligns itself with the statement of the European Union and the statement of the UN LGBTI core group. Harmonizing national policies and strategies with the precepts of the UN CRPD is at the core of the government of Malta's work in promoting the rights, participation, and inclusion of all disabled people. Guided by the Convention in 2021, Malta launched national strategies on both disability and autism. This was done with the full participation of civil society, including disability organizations, professionals, family members, and practitioners, and most importantly, disabled individuals themselves. Besides mirroring Malta's international obligations under the UN CRPD, these strategies align with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Management and Reduction. We look forward to sharing Malta's experience in implementing our national autism strategy with different delegations, including during the side events that will be organized. Since it ratified the UN CRPD in 2012, Malta has been committed in implementing the principle behind the Convention, nothing about us without us. This is why disabled people have been the key drivers in drafting and implementing our national strategies. In fulfillment of Article 4.3 of the Convention and General Comment No. 7, last January, Malta set up Engage. Engage brings together disabled people from different walks of life, together with representatives of academia and the national regulator, to discuss all policies made by government before these are referred further. One important piece of legislation being considered by this committee tackles forced sterilization, answering the calls from different activist and civil society organizations to ensure respect for the free, full, and informed consent of disabled people at all times and under all circumstances. Finally, we remain committed to the global push towards the institutionalization. Malta has been working hard over the past year to ensure that this can become a reality for disabled people in our country. Malta will continue to engage with the European Network on Independent Living, which is currently working with Agencia Support, our state disability service provider, and with civil society to bring about this change. We look forward to a fruitful conference, in particular to the return to in-person meetings, which we hope and will hope will increase the exchange of knowledge and networking opportunities. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now I would like to invite distinguished representative from Egypt to deliver statement via pre-recorded video.
It is my great pleasure and honor to participate in the conference of the state parties to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities held in June 2023. Through this little intervention, but full-heartedly, with all my due respect to all the attendees. Egypt was one of the earliest countries that signed the convention in 2007 and got it ratified in 2008. This reflects Egypt's strong commitment and belief to the comprehensive set of rights for people with disabilities. Egypt is legally committed to state and practice these rights in its different policies and programs, whether through the convention that was issued in 2014, in establishing National Council for People with Disabilities in 2012, or in issuing the Law for the Rights of People with Disabilities and the bylaws in 2018. The Egyptian policies and programs are aligned with legal commitments for all kinds of services, level of awareness, and all kinds of advocacy. Social protection and cash transfer for 1.2 million people with disabilities is stated in the Egyptian law and practices and policies with a total cost of 6 billion Egyptian pounds, added to food ration cards and paying education fees for the most vulnerable. We have 737 rehabilitation centers, institutions, offices that provides all kinds of rehabilitation for all types of people with disabilities. Coverage with universal health insurance is stated by law, and access to education and youth centers while fully considering integration services, although it is still in its early stages, but we are committed to make it better for the coming years. We also state the rights of people with disabilities for having job opportunities while allocating 5% of public jobs opportunities and also 5% for social housing. The President of the state, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, has already commanded to have a prosthetics and assistive device entity that provides prosthetics and assistive devices, especially for students. We already started of providing these devices for school and for university students for free, especially for the most vulnerable. Economic empowerment and financial inclusion also are being considered in considering the rights of people with disabilities. I wish I would have been with you in this wonderful event, but I'm sure that it will come out with real and tangible results, that it will leave its impact on people with disabilities in Egypt and in every place in the world.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And I now invite distinguished representative from Qatar to deliver the statement. You have the floor.
السيد الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيد
President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Qatar attaches particular importance to the rights of persons with disabilities, both on our national, regional and international levels. We are one of the first states to ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008. And here I would like to shed light on some of the greatest achievements that my country has made on the legislative and executive front. Amongst our achievements, we have the creation of a specialized center to provide services to very good quality services. The El Shafla Center has won various national and regional prizes, and the El Noor Center also, and the El Mada Center, which have contributed to making Qatar a leading country in this area, according to the DESA Index. We also have launched a policy and measures guide for service provision in service centres for persons with disabilities to increase the quality of services provided. We are all one of the most important services that we provide in the field of health care and reproductive health care. We ensure that we provide a large range of information in this field to persons with disabilities. We also adopted the Arab Decade of Persons with Disabilities and a classification, and without exaggeration, these two documents could be seen as the greatest achievements in this field across the Arab region. I am pleased, ladies and gentlemen, to inform you of the decision taken by the Qatari government to host the 4th Global Summit on Disabilities in Doha in 2028. in cooperation and coordination with the International Alliance on Disabilities. I invite you all to attend. Thank you.
Invite distinguished representative from Iceland. Iceland, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, people of all genders. Persons with disabilities do not enjoy equal human rights to others. This is true all over the world. This is sad, this is unacceptable, this needs to change. We, the member states, play a critical role here. The biggest challenge remains fighting disability stigma and discrimination. We need to ask ourselves critical questions about our own attitudes. Think about the words we use. Be supportive. We need to educate ourselves, be open to knowledge, spread positivity, and tell others about success stories. Let's not wait for others to make change. Let's be the change ourselves. The Icelandic government has put matters of people with disabilities high on its political agenda. In Iceland, many of us have been waiting impatiently for an action of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities into national legislation, as it was already ratified in 2016. And this is now to take place in January 2025. Another important step in implementing the Convention in Iceland will be taken in January next year with the establishment of an independent human rights foundation in accordance with the Paris Principles. Since October last year, we have been working on forming a national implementation plan for the Convention in active collaboration with the Association of Municipalities as well as various NGOs. And at this point in our process, we have collaborated on projects and ideas to bridge the gap between the Convention and today's reality. We have started to make radical changes, including the expansion of the labor market to include more varied employment opportunities. We are currently working on a reformation of the disability pension scheme to increase incentives for more active involvement on the labor market as well as in society at large, with the aim of improving the standard of living for people with disabilities. Last but not least, let's make sure that persons with disabilities are not left behind as we look towards new challenges such as digitalization, impacts of climate change, and development of our labor markets. I urge member states to take true leadership in tackling today's and tomorrow's challenges. It is up on us to make success. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And I now give the speaking opportunity to NGO Inclusion International. You have the floor.
Hello, my name is Tia Nellis. I'm a self-advocate. I work with Inclusion International. I'm speaking today representing people with intellectual disabilities. When me and other self-advocates are invited to a meeting or a conference, we often feel excluded. We are invited so organizations feel less guilty. Organizations pay for easy-read agendas to tick a box. However, inclusive participation is not just having people with intellectual disabilities in the room. It is not about paying a service to produce easy-read documents without involving us. A big part of participation for people with intellectual disabilities is easy-to-understand communication. Easy-to-understand communication is about including people with intellectual disabilities from the start. It is about removing barriers and making sure everyone has the support we need. It is not just about documents, but about all communication, including meetings. Yesterday, there was a meeting about the UN resolution on easy-to-understand communication. We were happy to have participation from several state missions. We were very happy to have many self-advocates from our network speaking. But much more can be done to make sure that we are included in UN events and systems, especially the Conference of State Parties. After 16 conferences, there are still too many barriers for us. We still do not get information in the way we need it. We are still excluded by language that is used in meetings. We are still not considered when decisions are made. Our support needs are not met. Inclusion International and Down Syndrome International have been working with our networks to create guidelines on how organizations and agencies and governments must include us. These are Listen, Include, Respect international guidelines for inclusive participation. The guidelines explain what you must do to make your work accessible and inclusive for us. We are very proud of these guidelines. We know what we need to be included because we are the experts. We hope the United Nations will use these guidelines for future meetings so that we can understand and fully participating. We thank you for the website, and we want you to visit our website at Listen, Include, Respect. Thank you. Please respect us, listen to us, and include us.
Thank you. Thank you. I now give the speaking opportunity to Australian Human Rights Commission. Please, you have the floor.
Madam Vice President, the Australian Human Rights Commission, an A-status national human rights institution, welcomes the overarching theme of this year's Conference of State Parties concerning harmonising national policies and strategies with the CRPD. In Australia, the main policy framework for the implementation of the CRPD is Australia's disability strategy. This is the second national strategy since Australia ratified the CRPD in 2008 and was developed with significant consultation with people with disability. An ongoing challenge in harmonising national policies and strategies with the CRPD is due to the federated model of government that exists in Australia, which creates disparities in rights protections in different Australian jurisdictions. An outcomes framework complements Australia's disability strategy with the first report published this year presenting baseline data across policy priority areas. Work is underway to build a national disability data asset concerning data in a de-identified manner across governments to track outcomes of policy endeavours. This is potentially world-leading and foundational to monitoring progress and implementing Article 31 of the CRPD. There is, though, no designated independent national monitoring mechanism in Australia, as is required under Article 33(2) of the CRPD. To enable several important policy initiatives to thrive, this needs to change. In terms of the sub-themes of the conference, concerning accessibility of sexual and reproductive health services for persons with disabilities, digital accessibility, and reaching underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities, Australia does not have a human rights charter and requires discrimination law reform. The impact is that many CRPD rights are not incorporated in domestic laws and gaps exist in the legal protections afforded to people with disability and indeed all Australians. Again, this needs to change. The Commission will continue to recommend the establishment of more robust mechanisms for the full and effective engagement of people with disability in policy development, implementation and monitoring in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the speaking opportunity to the League of Arab States. You have the floor.
السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، يمثل
President, ladies and gentlemen. The persons with disabilities are a priority of common Arab action and decision-making in the League of Arab States, and this is done through the various specialised bodies of our League, with the Minister of Social Affairs leading this and in cooperation with other committees with Common Arab Action and close collaboration with the UN specialised agencies and representatives for persons with disabilities. Allow me to underscore the Secretary-General's initiative, the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States, the second decade of the persons with disabilities, 2022-2032, which was adopted by Arab leaders in the most recent Arab summit in Jeddah. This will lead to real transformation in this field, as this decade contains a large number of important ideas and initiatives, including the first Arab classification, which is one of the leading ones in the world, which takes into consideration all the social, economic circumstances of persons with disabilities, and so that they can guarantee an effective stance. We have also cooperated to produce a report in cooperation with specialized organizations for persons with disabilities to guarantee autonomy for persons with disabilities using modern technology to improve the standard of living and integration of persons with disabilities, particularly on the labour market. This decade will also include an Arab roadmap to provide assistance to persons with disabilities in the field of protection against pandemics and diseases, with participation of all governmental and non-governmental organizations and civil society and emergency assistance organizations, to guarantee that there is a sufficient level of cooperation and coordination to protect all rights of all persons with disabilities in the case of pandemics or crises. We learned a lot from the COVID-19 pandemic, and we use these lessons to implement this roadmap. President, by way of conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to call on all member states and specialized entities of the United Nations to cooperate with us and to leverage all the plans that we have in place to lead to real transformation for the life of persons with disabilities. We are looking forward to the Global Summit on Disability with participation of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and Germany, and also the summit that shall be held in 2028 with the presidency of Qatar. These summits will lead to real transformation in this field, particularly to guarantee the rights of persons with disabilities post-2030. Thank you.
Representative of Ukraine to deliver statement via pre-recorded video.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants and delegates of the conference, today I have the honor to address you about an incredibly important topic, providing a barrier-free and safe space for our citizens with disabilities in the context of a full-scale war. Our government is systematically working to ensure the protection of the rights of people with disabilities, yet today in our country, due to Russia's full-scale invasion, no one feels safe. Due to constant Russian rocket attacks and airstrikes, individuals are injured daily, and the number of individuals with disabilities is increasing. We also see a new portrait of an individual with disability. Since 2022, disability is the result of mine explosive injuries, severe wounds on the battlefields, and contusions. Young, active individuals who aspire to self-realization and employment, the government of Ukraine, with the help of international partners, is making everything possible to realize these aspirations of millions of our people. To this end, we are implementing a comprehensive reform to support the employment of persons with disabilities. Access of people with disabilities to the labor market should be as comfortable and simple as possible. We have also reformatted the rehabilitation process for individuals with disabilities. We have created multidisciplinary teams comprising doctors, physical therapists, prosthetists, and rehabilitation experts. We are also digitizing a large number of services so that they are of high quality and delivered timely and conveniently. What challenges is Ukraine facing in the protection of rights of individuals with disabilities? On the temporarily occupied territories, the condition of individuals with disabilities is almost unknown. Very often, they are left without access to the most essential things necessary to guarantee their survival. Only liberation of these territories will help to restore and protect their rights. Russian aggression on the territory of Ukraine has also actualized the problems of mental health. Today, more than 70% of the population feels anxious due to constant attacks and safety concerns. That is why, under the auspices of the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, we launched the All-Ukrainian Mental Health Program, How Are You? As part of this program, we are creating resilience centers in communities where each citizen will be able to receive psychosocial support. We in Ukraine are also doing everything possible to ensure individuals with disabilities have access to benefits, an opportunity to realize themselves socially, the right to work, opportunity to start families, and simply to have a safe life. Without the support of the international community, these tasks for us are insurmountable. I sincerely thank everyone for your continuing support to Ukraine in creating a barrier-free and safe space for individuals with disabilities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And I would like now to invite distinguished representative of Zambia to deliver a statement. You have the floor.
Vice President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be here today to reaffirm Zambia's commitment to the advancement on the rights of persons with disabilities through the implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in line with the key principles of the Convention. Vice President, Zambia further acknowledges that the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities is critical for progressive implementation and delivery of policies, laws, administrative measures that guide government decisions towards an economic, sustainable, and inclusive development agenda. Vice President, you may wish to know that the robust drive by the government of the Republic of Zambia seeks to enable communities, systems, and structures to combat discrimination, including harmful stereotypes, recognize diversity, promote effective participation, and overcome barriers while focusing on the well-being of all persons with disabilities. This strategy focuses on decentralization, devolution, while at community level. Use the individual case management as a precondition to ensure that persons with disabilities live independently is emphasized. Zambia has embarked on the following: encouraging economic empowerment and entrepreneurship by ensuring that the Constituent Development Fund gets decentralized down to community level to benefit youths, women, and persons with disabilities through the formation of cooperatives, including by persons with disabilities. To enactment of the Mental Health Act, number 6 of 2019, representing a positive step towards the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. The recognition of the legal capacity addresses one of the main concerns faced by persons with disabilities in society. In addition, the Persons with Disabilities Act, number 6 of 2012, is progressive and addresses various matters which is required under the CRPD. Number 4, ensuring easy access to finance, either grants or loans for persons with disabilities. Number 5, the government, with support from development partners and cooperating partners with Zambia, has partnered with the Zambia Federation of Employment to create employment opportunities for persons with disabilities in the labor market, in addition to the 10% quota system for the employment in the government. Despite the strides made so far, the state party still is grappling with the provision of affordable employment for persons with disabilities. The state party would therefore continue to put in place structures and provision, inclusive development, to ensure that the country remains in tandem with the government in the provision of services for persons with disabilities, and achieving the goal in 2030 and the principle leaving no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are close to the end of this meeting. This afternoon at 3 p.m., we shall continue the same agenda item 5A in order to hear the remainder of the speakers of the general debate, starting with the European Union who shall be the first to speak in the afternoon, followed by Zimbabwe. A copy of the updated list of speakers will be posted in the room before 3 p.m. I would kindly request all delegations and would appreciate your full cooperation by arriving at the venue and taking your seats in advance around 2:50 p.m. this afternoon, so that collectively we can assure our meeting will be able to start at 3 p.m. and proceed per schedule. With this, I declare this meeting is concluded.